When my daughter asked us sometime in the autumn if we could go to London for Christmas, we jumped at the chance. She has no grandparents, and our respective siblings, having no parents either, celebrate Christmas with their in-laws. A trip can't compensate for a lack of relatives, but it can give you something else. We've celebrated New Year's in London once, and my daughter had been to London 3 times before. I've spent a semester there once and counted that it was my 14th time to the English capital, so it felt a bit like coming home. On our first full day there, we had planned to walk to Islington, away from the very centre or West End of London. We'd been there briefly before, but it had been pouring down, and we had jumped on a double-decker bus and gotten out of there, and not seen it properly. When I discovered that the yarn shop Loop of London was located there, it seemed pretty auspicious. We always try to visit more local areas when we travel, and to live in different parts of town, so we feel we become a little more familiar with the place every time. We went through this lovely little passage, as we did last time. And I realized I'd walked past the yarn shop last time, but of course not noticed, as I wasn't a knitter then. More on this in a separate knitting video. We took the tube or the underground back to Trafalgar Square, where it was jam-packed with tourists, like ourselves. We certainly weren't the only ones to think of spending Christmas in London. One of my daughter's friends was there as well, with her father and sister, also going for a different Christmas. And the two of them of course wanted to meet. I suggested Piccadilly Circus as rendezvous point, knowing it's the most crowded and touristy place in London, but also knowing that my daughter and her friend would appreciate it, and it is a typical meet-up place. From Trafalgar Square it was a short walk up Haymarket to Piccadilly Circus, and it felt like a small assault stepping into it. People, noise, traffic, lights galore. But also Christmas lights like only London can provide. We gave our daughter 2 hours to walk around with her friend, only a little worried to let her loose in London. She's used to reading maps on her phone, and she's travel savvy in general. And I knew she'd be thrilled to be on her own with a friend for a little while. So we, her parents, strolled around a bit, passing through the Burlington Arcade, down to Piccadilly, the street, not the circus, where especially Fortnum and Mason had gone to town with their Christmas decorations. We went into Hatchard's, one of the oldest bookstores in London, dating back to 1797, and a shop that Oscar Wilde used to frequent. There were 2 books I wanted to buy, Lessons by Ian McEwan and The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis, and I found them both there. My daughter snapped that she and her friend were in Oxford Street, and we, having another hour to spend, decided to go for a little Christmas cocktail, a pisco sour in Swan's Bar on Piccadilly. Highly recommended. When we met up again, we walked to nearby and possibly even more chaotic Leicester Square. And from there on to Covent Garden. The Christmas decorations and lights abounded, and you could see why so many people traveled to London for Christmas. You can't really complain about the crowds when you're a part of them, but it was almost too crowded. Still, a crowded London is better than no London. In Denmark, we celebrate Christmas on the 24th. We sing and dance or walk around the Christmas tree and open presents on Christmas Eve. The 25th is kind of an afterthought, and for Christmas lunches only. But when in Rome or London, we wanted to celebrate it the English way. We would open presents brought with us from home on the morning of the 25th. I'd arranged for a little Christmas tree to be installed in our room. So on the 24th, we went for a walk down by the Thames River, making our way to Westminster Bridge and the Houses of Parliament, and Big Ben, my daughter's favourite building in London. It was again full of tourists, but today it felt somehow comforting, as if we were all celebrating Christmas together, here, in London. From there we walked up Whitehall, past the Prime Minister's residence, back up to Trafalgar Square, and around the streets near Seven Dials. It was a balmy 14 degrees Celsius, and people were sitting outside. I think I read somewhere it was the warmest Christmas Eve ever in the UK. We took a closer look at the stalls and Christmas decorations in Covent Garden. And then we went to get ready for our Christmas Sunday roast that we'd booked from home at the Savoy. It was delicious. And when we came back out, fake snow was falling in the shape of soapy foam flakes, and people were lining up to take pictures. We walked down the Strand, across the Waterloo Bridge, and marveled at how we were out in public, walking around London, when everybody at home was getting ready to eat their Christmas dinner in the privacy of their homes. My daughter remembered a skating place from last time, being a skater herself, and we passed by there as well, before heading back to the Savoy for our next booking. A table at the legendary American bar, which I'd been recommended by a bartender years before, and it was legendary, as were the Christmas decorations at the hotel. After the opulence of the day before, we decided to attend the Christmas Day service at St. Paul's Cathedral. We had first planned a midnight mass the night before, but were too tired, and I was relieved when I found out about a service the following afternoon in Christopher Wren's masterpiece of a cathedral, until I saw the line and realized hundreds of other people had had the same idea. We didn't think we would get in, but we had underestimated the size of the cathedral, and felt extremely fortunate to get seats in the middle of the church. I know I wasn't supposed to film, but I simply had to document, for you, the choir with the angelic voices of the young boys. I couldn't of course film them as they walked up the aisle, but it was a touching moment, all of it. I was so grateful to experience it. When we came back outside, the weather had turned positively Dickensian, which seemed suitable as we were in the city, capital C, the oldest part of London. We passed one of the oldest pubs, Ye Old Cheshire Cheese, and I saw a sign pointing to Dr. Samuel Johnson's house, which I'd always wanted to see, he of the first dictionary of the English language, and that timeless and still true quote, "When a man is tired of London, he is tired of life." Bigger, newer houses had sprung up around it, but then much of this part of London was destroyed during the Blitz in World War II. But not Dr. Johnson's house, and, mercifully, not St. Paul's Cathedral. Blue skies greeted us on Boxing Day, which was fortunate because we ended up walking about 13 kilometers that day. First heading to Trafalgar Square, where every year you can see the Christmas tree given to London by Norway as a thank you for helping them during World War II. My daughter wanted to visit the Lego store, and from there we walked up into Soho. Judging by the crowds in Carnaby Street and later Regent Street, you'd think London's shops had been closed for days. But unlike in Denmark, shops were only closed on Christmas Day. But we learned that sales begin on Boxing Day, and it seemed as if Londoners and tourists alike were out and about in hordes. We went into the beautiful department store, Liberty, built in a Tudor revival style, and which on the inside looks almost like a Shakespearean theatre. We bought 2 Christmas baubles on sale for £4. We walked over to New Bond Street, probably London's most expensive street, where I suspected the Christmas decorations would reflect that. And indeed, they did. At some point I asked my daughter, "Do you remember seeing Buckingham Palace? How about we walk through Green Park and then down to the palace, just to see it again?" She had had enough of shops too by then, and happily said yes. I recalled seeing deck chairs in Green Park during the summer season. I seemed also to recall Virginia Woolf mentioning the park in her novel Mrs. Dalloway. We walked down to Buckingham Palace, which turned out to be another idea that everyone else had had too. It seemed almost as if it was the place to go on Boxing Day, and the mall was close to traffic, so we could walk in the middle of the street, which of course we did. My daughter remembered the Victoria Memorial in front of the palace. I told her I had worked in a street close by, Buckingham Gate, back when I was an intern at the United Nations Information Centre in London, which she found hard to believe. We talked about how we'd seen the Mall full of people on many occasions, the crowning of King Charles being the most recent. At 5 p.m. we settled down to a much-loved ritual when we're in the UK, afternoon tea, again at the Savoy, with the requisite sandwiches. My daughter guessed what was in 3 out of 4 of them, and scones and cakes. What we couldn't finish we took away with us in what must be the fanciest doggy bag ever. No need for an evening meal then, except the remainder of said doggy bag. We strolled up to nearby Covent Garden, enjoying our last evening in London, but also beginning to feel a bit overwhelmed with crowds, but also with lovely experiences that needed time to sink in. On our last day, we were in no hurry to eat breakfast and pack, because we had a late flight. As it was an overcast day and we were beginning to feel a bit tired, we decided to spend a few hours on board a double-decker bus so our daughter could see London a bit from above. We began at Trafalgar Square, drove down Whitehall, past Downing Street number 10, and down to the Houses of Parliament and Westminster Abbey. We'd already seen it, of course. In fact, we've seen all of it many times before, but my daughter needed newer memories, and we all appreciated being transported around on our last day, especially when it began to rain. Also, we wanted to see Tower Bridge, and it was too far away to walk there. We crossed the Thames and drove around on the south side a little, passed by the Shard, the tallest building in the UK. My daughter and I had a bit of a friends moment as we drove across Tower Bridge. We passed the Tower of London, and I told my daughter about Henry VIII and how several of his wives had met their end there, and that 2 princes had once disappeared there back in the 1400s when there was much fighting for the throne. It's been years since I last visited the tower, and we agreed to visit it next time, also to see the crown jewels. There's always a next time when it comes to London, for me at least. It was getting dark as we neared Marble Arch, which was being renovated, and we just skirted the western end of Oxford Street, a street I never visit anymore, and then drove down Park Lane, across from Hyde Park, and onto Piccadilly again. We passed Bond Street, the Christmas lights now beginning to be turned on, and Fortnum and Mason. Once again we took in the crowds around Piccadilly Circus, this time thankfully elevated a little above it all. We drove through the rain, down Haymarket and out into Trafalgar Square, ending both the bus ride and the trip where we began it, grateful for these jam-packed magical days in a city that, I'm happy to report, I'm not yet tired of.